Welcome everyone to another chapter of Hyper-Borea. If you are enjoying this series, please share with a friend, whether that's private message or sharing it to your social media feed. Also, remember to like and comment. I would love to hear what people are liking about the series and what people think is going to happen. Predictions are my favorite to read. The Amazon link to the book itself is in the description. Thank you everybody. Enjoy the chapter. Chapter 12. We hastily gathered what we could, some food, some water, communicative glasses, conscious that our friends could be under attack at the moment, the witch sinking her deep claws into their minds, turning them, bending them, breaking them to her will. The Sirius's champion, notably absent from that battle at the campsite, had to have been lurking around somewhere. Caleb and I had what we needed, secured in packs, slung over our backs. My magics will carry us forward with a good pace, but I may leave you temporarily if I believe time is of the essence, I informed Caleb, who soberly nodded. He was tired. The sun had not yet broken over the horizon, yet the desert became more alive with detail and color as we jogged down the dirt road, following the impression of the Suburban's tires in the soft dirt. Caleb was not used to this rhythm of life, a condition in which an adventuring party sleeps little, with much action punctuating long periods of travel. I had not the slightest clue what it was like for someone without the talent. It must have been debilitating on the body. I would have to use some of my healing magics on the group each night before sleep found me, if we had a group left. There were no ingredients I was aware of for revitalizing the health of oneself or others. Instead, the spells had to be channeled from oneself. Thus, there was a restriction on how much could be done in a single day without rest. We jogged, my battle magic carrying our steps forward with increased speed and decreased toll on our energy levels. We covered ground quickly, arriving at the highway in no time. "Look here, Caleb," I indicated with a finger, the track of the tires as they rapidly veered off the path and into the dense desert foliage. "Why would they do that?" He was up the embankment then, looking about. "I don't see them. It looks like they kept driving." I spotted more prints in the dirt, many prints. The most concerning were of a size larger than the rest. I placed my jeweled slipper next to it. It could only belong to the champion. I shivered. What was their fate? If they fell into the witch's hands, what could she discern from their memories? I imagined young Samon's head within that griffin woman's paws, wrapped around it, sucking, his eyes black as she listened to every word of the conversations I had had with the boy. Thankfully, I had not revealed to him the location of the artifact, nor my discovery of it, only my interest in some red mountains. I had not disclosed my dream either. I had nearly forgotten that. "Come, Caleb, we must make haste." I passed him, keeping along the blaze trail of the Suburban. I was conscious of the dream again. Where had it come from? Was my mind conjuring a potential story arc for this strange, rusted land? I knew from the maps that we were not far from the Sunset Crater, but it would be many, many days' travel on foot. But the staff did possess teleportation capabilities. This was significant. So far, the spells for such magic were in their infancy, the most talented masters only being able to teleport a foot or two, useful in blade combat but not useful for much else. It was restricted to only places one could visually see and limited when objects or walls were in the way. It also took a tremendous amount of ingredients or energy. Without a catalyst, it could knock a master out for the day just doing it once. Rensharo was the farthest recorded teleportation ever performed. Even then, it was not clear if that was what had really happened. Given I, and now Gilruel, had traveled through time as well, it is very possible that we just disappeared, then reappeared in the same spot across time, the only reason we were not in the same place being the Earth had rotated. That could explain why King Marlon's grandfather was in the ocean, his attempt at Rensharo without Zyreth the artifact, blinking him from existence just long enough for the earth to turn, and the ocean being under his feet when he reappeared again. "Broken glass!" Caleb called. I snapped from my thinking back to reality, spotting the sign. Yes, it appeared to be glass from a window of the Suburban, but the tracks went on, and so did we. After a few minutes at our enhanced pace, we came to the crest of another embankment. I recognized that we had left camp going west, but the Suburban had tacked off road and northeast. I had the benefit of having seen this landscape as a bird, and I could easily recollect that given the wash kept a north-south bearing, we were sure to run back into it, given our course now. This embankment ahead had to be it, the edge of the wash. It was crowned by thirsty creosote bushes, eager to suck into their roots any water that might find its way down from the wash after a storm. Curiously, there was another vehicle parked just before the bushes. Oh no, did we follow the wrong car? No, I don't think so. My eyes spotted more than one pair of tracks, as one appeared to continue toward the shrubs. There, Caleb, down there. I pointed to what was a curiously suburban-sized hole punched between the crowded plants. We ignored the second car, and were through the bushes now and standing over the wash, the black vehicle of Kevin Hatherson half buried in the sand on the other side. Several bodies littered the ground around it. You don't think... Caleb looked to me, pain and worry in his eyes. Well, I certainly hope not. Let us not waste time with speculation. I was down the sandy hill and to the doors of the car then, finding no one inside. Oh, thank God, Caleb exclaimed, falling against the metal vehicle and crying. He sobbed. My initial instinct was to kick him and encourage him to rise so we could find where they had gone, but I was feeling merciful, this being his first real glimpse at what most of the history had looked like. The cruel but fair game of strength against weakness. The truth was obvious beyond the walls of their domesticated city. Those who survived were those who had the strength and the will to do so. That strength coming in the way of muscle, intellect, and wit. One could compensate, but it was masters such as myself who would overcome, and did overcome. I had dozens of expeditions like this under my belt, enabling me to dispassionately scan the bodies for clues on the ground, while the runt boy moaned and groaned. What I found curious was that some of the bodies, no, all of the bodies, had been disabled by what appeared to be pinpoint projectile holes in their heads. A bullet, I surmised, must have done this. As surely as I had surmised, I found one of the culprits. I picked up the small cannon, careful to keep the barrel pointed away from my body. It was clunky, heavy. The design seemed simple relative to its capabilities. Black metal and plastic, an ergonomic handle with a trigger. The trigger was guarded, I'm assuming, so one couldn't accidentally discharge the weapon by holstering it incorrectly. There was a button on the side, curious. I wondered what it did, so I pressed it. Out came a rectangle and dropped to the floor. Now I could see into the bottom of the handle of the gun. I picked up the discarded piece and found that it had a small shelf which could be depressed. On the ground were shiny copper, no, bronze, no, brass, yes, brass pieces. These must have been elements of the ammunition. Yes, one would depress them into the shelf until the spring bore no more, then load it into the firearm, then begin pulling the trigger. Fascinating. I dropped the gun, it being much too heavy to take with us. Caleb, it appears there was a fight here. Stop your crying. Your friends... I paused, correcting myself. Our friends are likely still alive. Caleb was up now and by my side. Where do we even start to look? He wiped away his tears. My eyes found the largest tracks, the footprints of the champion. They were going north, up the wash, north towards Sedona. Let us go and see if there are keys in that vehicle. We can take it north up the wash. You can drive it, yes? Sniffling, he wiped a final tear from his eye. I've always wanted to drive a jeep. Doug woke up from a violent cough, his body automatically clearing his airway of blood. He retched into the sand next to him, spit and pinkish blood pooling there. Pink, oxygenated foam. It was coming from his lungs. He was wheezing with every breath and felt tremendous pain in his torso, where that big monster had punched him, knocking him out cold. Where was he? He could see the blood pool next to him, but nothing else. Were his eyes all screwed up, too? No, there was a cloth blindfold wrapped lazily around his head. Whomever had done it hadn't tightened it. He could see immediately below him, but not much else. His body had been sagging forward, kept from resting face down in the dirt by what? His hands were tied, and he felt it. Completely secondary to the pain from his injury was the feeling of a rope tied under his arms and around his chest. He leaned backward. He was on his knees. The rope slackened slightly. There wasn't much give. His shoulders felt a piece of wood. What was that? He heard speaking now. Quite the mess you've caused me. It was raspy, feminine, not deep enough to be from a smoker, but the same quality, just higher pitch. Like halfway between a deep smoker's hoarse voice and someone who had sucked in helium as a party gag. The allies of Sovos were within my grasp, their minds and purposes being turned to mine, their memories harvestable for my learning of their arcanist designs for this red land, maybe even pointing me to the artifact. She cawed the last word, artifact. If one couldn't find that out contextually, they could with her emphasis. Doug didn't know if she was talking to him, but he guessed she was. It seemed like those people who were after the college kids. He didn't know what an arcanist was, nor what Sovos was, but it didn't take much to guess that the weird magic dude was him, the dude with the weird sandals. If we had more time, I would harvest your memories now, then turn you to my devices. She was coming closer, definitely speaking in his direction. Doug figured in his mind, if he was here, then that meant that they had lost the fight. Was Lance and Jack here too? He had to take a chance. Lance? Jack? Are you guys here? He coughed with the effort. Do not speak, the woman responded venomously. Doug was punched in the face, a mercy against the alternative of being punched in the gut with his injury. The risk had paid off, though. He had heard a single grunt to his left. If the other person wasn't too scared or passed out, that meant that just 2 of them had been captured. Or did that mean just 2 of them had lived? He shivered at the thought. You are the warriors of this society? Police? She said the word as if it was new to her. I expected more from a people with such superior technology. Doug wondered how long it would take to get a response team out here. How long it would take Mendoza to mobilize the cavalry when he didn't check in for their morning call. Hell, maybe Jack had made it back to the jeep or van and called for backup already. What a mess this was. If the media got tape of their fight at the Suburban, it would look like federal agents just gunning down civilians. What an investigation this whole thing was going to be. There had to be dozens dead, and what were they going to do? Say magic was to blame? Show tapes at the bar? What a mess. No matter. The raspy voice was close now. We will move to Sedona next and gather more friends. He could tell she was speaking through a twisted smile. Then we shall take control of the seat of power there, the Lord, procure the weapons, and keep Sovos from coming anywhere near his precious artifact. Doug felt a cold finger on his cheek and flinched. Such beautiful, dark skin you have. Untie me and I'll give you a kiss, Doug taunted, and was punched again. I'm married, was the response. Then it was quiet. It was eerie. What was she doing? Doug tried to twist his head to peek through the blindfold without giving away that he could see, albeit only a little. He didn't want to lose any advantage he had on these people, no matter how small. He could see nothing. He's here! Was that fear in her voice? Take me! Run! There were heavy footfalls, commotion all around. Doug was forced to his feet as the log he was tied to rose. Run them down, Caleb! No survivors! I ordered sternly, a bit of a cackle in my voice, perhaps from lack of sleep. I would need to temper that. I did not want to have my subordinate questioning my sanity. Caleb accelerated down the wash, which had been growing wider and wider. Directly ahead now was open ground, a space of about 100 feet without vegetation. It was about 24 servants of the witch with a chain gang of prisoners tied to a log that they carried on their shoulder. Blindfolded, they were in the center. Take care to avoid the prisoners, I ordered. Caleb, wordlessly, with a face of grim determination, ran down several zombies on the outer edge of the group. The jeep struck them with a thump, 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 as they flew off the thick ram affixed to the bumper on the vehicle. The rammed victims fell by the side, crippled but crawling after us nonetheless. I shot their heads with lightning. Pop, 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 they exploded. Caleb was turning in circles now around the prisoners, blood splattering on the jeep as we made quick work of the mind-controlled mass. All of your hard work for naught, witch! I screamed in joyful revelry, cursing myself for the outburst again. Measured stoicism was a better trait for our leader. It seemed sleep was necessary, but the speed of the car, the churning dust in the air, the spray of the blood, and the game of whack-the-mole I was playing were getting to me, my blood and adrenaline coursing. The jeep performed valiantly, plowing through a dozen or more, as a charging bull would. The vehicle groaned and the engine compartment coughed as we skidded to a halt. No matter, the remaining mine slaves I took down with fire and ice. Prisoners, a good sign, I said to Caleb as I approached the middle of the wash. He was behind me now, though his face stricken with worry, not resplendent joy as mine was from our little foray. I tempered my enthusiasm, not wanting for him to come to view me as cold or uncaring, not wanting him to realize I viewed this largely as a game, a grand chess match. Could anyone blame me? I counted 6 figures on their feet, covered in blood and guts, all tied to a log, with ropes around their chests and hands bound as well. "I don't see any of them," Caleb observed. He was unsure whether that was a good or bad sign, his voice quivering, his nerves getting to him. I made a mental note to give him some mental rest by manipulation of the mind. Later, a worry-free sleep of deepness would do him good. We worked our way to the front of the group, 4 men and 2 women. None spoke, though they were not gagged. They were in varying mental and physical states, some tense and nervous. One appeared to be unconscious and hanging limply from the log. Another appeared to be placid as a morning lake. He, the calm one, was curious among them. Like the unconscious fellow, he was dressed well, with a long-sleeved white-collar shirt and tie. Though it used to be white, now it was muddy and bloody. What set him apart was his size. He was tremendously muscular. In my quick glance over the group, I had registered him to be still and even relaxed, but it was clear to me that he was coiled like a spring. Still, yes, but capable of exploding at a moment's notice. There was something else about him, too. His breathing, yes. He was injured badly. I would have to keep an eye on this fellow. I snapped my fingers, and the blindfolds came off, the ropes around their chests slackening and the log tumbling backward harmlessly. Their hands remained bound. "Fear not, prisoners of the witch." The 6 blinked slowly as the world came to them. A few had skin cracked, red, and broken from terrible sun exposure. "I am your savior, Lord Arcanus Sovos of Alfheim." They're not here," Caleb muttered. Where had those underlings of mine run off to? "Can you untie us?" a man with a small frame and matted brown hair asked. Of course. I have freed you of all and am to send you on your way. I just wanted to explain some things to you before you ran off scared. I am not here to hurt you." Some in the group looked about themselves, noticing the couple of dozen beheaded corpses around them, bent and twisted into odd shapes by my magic and the force of the jeep hitting them. Some looked themselves over, a woman nervously twitching her shoulder back and forth in an attempt to cast a disembodied human arm off of her person. "I simply require that when you are questioned by the authorities, you give them the correct information. Do we understand each other?" The group members, barring the unconscious or dead fellow, all looked to me and individually nodded. "Good," I smiled warmly, reading a fellow's mind before continuing. "Oh, what's going on? Where's the woman? Am I safe? Is this one of her tricks? Is he really going to free us? I've got to run. I've got to find the road and run." I was impressed. He looked somewhat frantic, but not that frantic. I better dispel his fears. "As I had stated, I am Sovos, a master of casting magics." I demonstrated a lightning bolt skyward. The prisoner's eyes widened, as some flinched. "The woman who had held you captive is my enemy. You may call her the witch." I simplified things for them, my goal being for whichever one of these captives makes it to the police, that they don't get me shot outright. "I am the only one who can stop her." I paused for effect, before repeating myself. "I am the only one who can stop her." The statement was carefully calculated. I needed it repeated to the proper authorities to cause them to think twice before interfering. Given the scale of the casualties already, it was inevitable that many resources would be expended by this powerful government. I needed to influence that response in any way I could, before they sent tanks, trains, planes, and cars to Sedona, interrupting my quest. "The road is that way," I pointed west. "You are free to go." I snapped, and their remaining bindings fell away. Immediately, one man took off to the east, a woman following him after a moment's pause. The remaining 4 massaged their raw wrists, except for the now presumed dead man on the ground. The big man turned that man over and felt for a pulse. "All these people," the man with matted brown hair and a slight frame asked. "What did that witch do to them?" "Mind control. She melted their brains and filled their heads with her black blood magic. Their wills were not their own." Oh my gosh. The gravity of my words sank in for the man. It must have been quite shocking to them all, never having witnessed magic before, only reading about it in stories, only viewing it in a limited capacity on their video game screens. Seeing it raw, in person, with consequences was cause for mental digestion, illusions of safety shattered. "Well, good luck," I clapped my hands together. Caleb, I summoned. He followed me to the jeep, but halted as we heard a voice behind us. Hold on. It was the big man, his voice matching his body. We turned. Yes, my only response. I was impatient. I didn't have time to waste. Caleb and I were weary and needed to get to town to reprovision. Two things. That jeep, it belongs to us. I don't know for sure, but I'm pretty sure we saved your friends' lives. Second, he's hurt. Bad. He motioned to the unconscious man. I need to get him into that jeep and get him to a hospital. I puckered my lip in thought. These two could be useful, but they could also be a hindrance. I weighed the trade-off in my mind, the impression that I was charitable and benevolent ultimately being my motivation for assenting. Yes, come on, come. We took our seats as the man loaded first his friend and then himself into the back. Wait, how far is the road again? The matted hair man asked. Probably about an hour, I smiled. Get walking. But what if she comes back? He said. She will not. Her magic is most strong at night, and she will not dare come near me, even if the sun weren't rising at this very moment. Remember, only I can defeat her. The man thought for a moment. There's steps on the side of the jeep. Can we hold on? He advocated for himself and the female. I sighed, long and loudly. But I was invested in this benevolence idea, so I nodded. Hurry! I waved the last woman over. Go ahead, Caleb, start us up. Caleb nodded and turned the key, the jeep sputtering, coughing, and groaning, much like a sick beast of burden. He tried again and again to the same result. Pop the hood, the large man ordered. I played off this challenge to my leadership with a look of indifference. The front metal plate of the car was lifted, and silence was the answer. I dismounted from my seat and approached, seeing the problem for myself. This thing isn't going anywhere, was the man's diagnosis. Every mechanical nook and cranny was stuffed with organs, guts, and hunks of flesh from our assault. I suppose these cars were not constructed for close-quarters combat. Caleb, we have some walking to do. Now, wait a minute. The man who had already wasted much of my time kept speaking. My friend, he can't walk. Is there anything you can do to help? I thought on it. There were many ways I could help. I could assemble a stretcher for the lad at the snap of my fingers. I could levitate him all the way back to the road. I could cause for him to weigh less than a child. I could just heal him myself and wash my hands of the matter. But what was this strange man's motivation? I read his mind. Lance is going to die out here. Please help. Please say you can do something for him. It appeared he was genuinely concerned for his compatriot, who was named after a military weapon. But I simply did not have any more time to waste, my ingredients running low. Caleb tugged on my arm then, my thoughts far from the lad. We have to do something, he whispered. I groaned again. Fine. I looked to the man, wanting something for my trouble. But first, who are you? Why did you and your friend ride your jeep here in the middle of the night? You were not in the area prior to the attack, and do not think you can lie to me. I will know. The man waited a moment before answering. He was smart. He was thinking before speaking. He was careful, which is why I read his mind the whole time. What he thought was, what should I tell him? That we've been watching him and his friends for the last day and a half? That we have seen what they've done at the bar? Could he really tell if I was lying? He's a wizard. Why not? Could he read my mind? Is he reading my mind right now? Are you reading my mind, weirdo? Satisfied that I was not reading his mind, or perhaps gambling, he answered, My name is Doug. My friend is Lance. We're with the FBI. Yo, Caleb's jaw dropped. We got a call about a man without a head outside of a bar, so we investigated. We were camping out on the highway, watching you all, when we saw the explosions. Our orders were to stand back unless lives were in danger. We were interested in protecting the kids. Doug pointed to Caleb. We drove up on the Suburban, crashed, and the kids being taken out by that big guy from the bar. We engaged with him and the men and women with him. I was distracted and attacked from behind. I don't know what happened next because I woke up tied to that log. His mind gave away no deception. This was a man of authority, given Caleb's expression. It was vital that he knew of my good nature, so he could communicate that to his superiors. It was paramount that he live. I took stock of myself and my abilities, my fatigue. Healing, as I had stated, is a taxing endeavor, but not as taxing as healing oneself. I am practiced in healing as well. With this in mind, I decided to invest in fixing his comrade. I will heal your friend, but none else. I am limited in that ability. I am assuming you have another vehicle on the highway. This one, I motioned to the jeep, seems fragile and unfit for camping. Yeah, we have a van. Good, we will take it after you have called for reinforcement. The man flinched, ever so slightly, barely perceptible, an indication that he did not find these terms agreeable. It was too fast for me to read his mind, however, and his response was simple. Okay, deal. Doug reached out his hand. What for, I had no idea. I levitated his friend out of the rear of the vehicle and placed my hands upon him. He was in a bad way, barely breathing and bones broken. This would take a lot of energy. I sighed. I was committed. I channeled the magic, the healing taking place in an instant, my mind aching with the effort. If these lawmen chose to double-cross us, I would make quick work of them. I had no time to play games with this lack of energy. The lance fellow sat up from his place on the ground, coughing. Everything, he wheezed, hurts. You're telling me, rookie. The man called Doug laughed and cringed, clutching his ribs. I turned to the fellow with brown matted hair and the woman dressed athletically. Am I to assume you will be joining our party until we reach the vehicle? We'll want to get you two to a hospital and get statements from you when you're ready. Doug cut in. And a helicopter to find the others, he mumbled to himself, as if making a note mentally so as not to forget. Then let us be quick. Every second we waste, the witch takes more lives under her spell. I took off at a steady clip, Caleb at my heels, the rest of our mangled and battered troop limping behind. Into the desert and out of the wash we walked, among the cacti, shrubs, and stunted trees, leaving jeep and bloodied pile of corpses behind. The sun was above the horizon now, the soil under my feet alight. It was the same dirt we had camped upon, but the color of rust, an orangish red. This was Sedona soil, the seeress having stepped onto the land the night prior in order to launch her attack upon me. I did not suspect she would have taken such action. I expected more caution on her part, a combined magical energy soaking the dry sponge that was this land. Vortexes, moon crystals, the native myths of skinwalkers. What was real? What was a story crafted to scare little children into obeying their parents? I had a feeling I would soon find out. Total darkness, a shade of black darker than space. For even in space does one have the stars to observe. Yes, a black hole would rival this darkness, for this was a black hole itself, deep in the earth, beneath the red rock, beneath the famous mountains and formations that tourists flew in from around the world to capture on phone camera and video alike. Yes, deep below the rust-colored rock, inside peaks such as Cathedral, Bell, Snoopy, Brins Mesa, and even buried under the aptly named Devil's Kitchen sinkhole. In this darkness, for the first time in centuries, light appeared. It started small, and to any who might observe it, it would appear white, as time spent in that unfathomable darkness would find a light of any color to be indiscernible in detail, blinding. But this was not a white light, no, it was blue, specifically light blue, with a touch of green, of a shade to match the turquoise jewelry of the Native American tribes who used to lay claim exclusively to this region of the earth. The turquoise blue light was small, an inch by an inch in diameter, its lumens low, dim, levitating in the middle of this deep black hole under the earth. It hovered, growing in intensity now, its brightness static over the seconds, but minute by minute gaining intensity. Slowly. The light was enough now to illuminate the object of emittance, the central jewel on a crown of finely polished stones, capping a regal staff. Regal in the sense of shamanic, tribal royalty. It would look clean and finely made to any king, but its style betrayed a uniquely American Southwest creation. The light beamed upward then, unimpeded, striking the roof of the cavern, and crawling along it as if a viscous liquid had spilled out of the sink and was flowing across a kitchen floor. At intervals of about a dozen feet, two beams broke off, following the curvature of the cavern and trailing down the walls into the floor. The intervals would appear as ribs in a great cage, for the cavern was thus shaped, the staff in the air spinning slightly, slowly as the light crawled. As the beams found the cavern floor, it was revealed that there was a pool of water below the ancient artifact, emitting the light which sat where the heart would, though centered in the cavity. The pool was glowing that turquoise blue now, and the lights of the staff found the end walls of the cavern stretching back a few hundred yards. They arced back along the floor in their same slow crawl, and found their trajectory toward the pool. In caverns across Sedona, the lights would streak the walls of the caves, each cavern being unique in its own right, and displaying the light in different manners. There was the cavern under Spider Rock, keeping in an arachnid theme, the great rock walls illuminated by an equally great spider on the ceiling, appearing to be painted in luminescent paint. Another cave, this one under the Devil's Bridge, had an outcropping of geodes that spanned the length of the multi-room dungeon. The crystals illuminated turquoise blue now. Each cavern was unique in its presentation, each unique in its own temperature, its contents, its floor, its volume of water or lack thereof. In the cavern of the artifact, where the staff hung suspended above the pool of water, a thin rail of light tracked from the pool alongside the floor. It crept along at seemingly a snail's pace, dissecting the cavern in two as it tracked toward its intended target, a man. He was hunched against a dividing wall, the only wall of its kind in the cavern. To his flanks sat a tunnel on his left and a tunnel on his right. The light neither arced this way or that, just streaming towards its intended target in the center, the last man to hold the staff. Had he been conscious, he would have been watching the light creep, egging it on with words, begging for it to reach him sooner. This man having seen the light dim centuries ago, hoping and praying to whatever lord of darkness he served that it would return one day. That day was here, and he had had his waiting, and he was tired of it. Just when his kingdom had been established, his reign was cut short, and he was forced into waiting again, just as he had for a near millennium in that volcano named for the sunset. The light was inches from Mictlan, the leader Sovos had glimpsed in the vision of the past. Though, besides him, there was another in the room. An observer stole a glance now, appearing just a moment to see if the feeling he had felt welling up in him were of a truth. The light from the staff on all sides of the caverns and from the pool showed him that truth. Mictlan hunched against the wall, nearly falling over as he had slipped into a deep, dreamless slumber. His pudgy body of reddish-brown skin adorned in paint the same color as the light, just barely an inch away from him. He wore a headdress that was of feathers and antlers, a cruel mockery of the ceremonial kind worn by chieftains of tribes more noble, virtuous, and true than those who had occupied and ruled this hell pit, the red lands once belonging to the Sinagua people. The observer had seen what he did not want to, that the visitors he had observed doing battle in the dead of night had crossed into this land of red rock, that their trespass had done more than destroy foliage and uproot rocks that had been undisturbed for generations, that their actions had woken a sleeping evil, an evil that would do more than disturb the land, but disfigure it and stain it with foul intent. The observer had seen enough, and he had appeared, and as he had appeared, so did he disappear, quietly and unnoticed. Mictlan gasped for air, his eyes opening wide. He blinked, and his eyes were glowing, the same color as the pool before him. He blinked, and they were normal, dull brown. Blinking again, they were alight, finally blinking once more, and returning back to normal. He was achy, the kind of aches one felt after an arduous journey. Though he had not left the spot he had been sitting for perhaps centuries, maybe even longer. He did not know. He knew one thing: the water under his staff would make him feel all the better. Mictlan tried to stand, but he found he had not strength enough to move anything beyond his legs. "Curse you, Potanki! You awake me, but withhold your strength." The words came out slurred, some raspy. His throat was dry. The ageless man half slid and half crawled down the cavern, the some 50 yards to the pool. His legs slowly regained feeling, but not strength enough to stand. He incorporated them into his slow movement, using the scrawny limbs to push as he all but rolled toward the water. He tossed his head-dress aside, cringing as it pulled on his knotted hair, cursing his body. He recalled the day he had taken over this form, a quick recollection of gratitude. Though he despised its limited mobility, its aches and pains, he was well willing to sacrifice in order to possess a vessel to manipulate the world around him, something every spirit from the other world wishes to do, but rarely achieves. He had seized the opportunity to possess this body long ago. The medicine man who this form had belonged to had turned to black magic to settle a petty feud. Mictlan had enticed him with false promises, of course, as they all did. then occupied the man's heart and worked his influence into every pore, bullying the man's mind out until he had full control. It wasn't the first body he would have chosen, but it was a body. The body he possessed had now crawled to the edge of the pool, and Mictlan lowered his head and sipped from the cool, pure water. He drank deep, gulping, feeling the liquid coat his dry lungs and stomach. He fell onto his back afterward, breathing, watching the staff slowly spin above the water. He lay this way, thinking, staring, for what must have been an hour. He regained his mental faculties, the grogginess of deep sleep fading with each passing minute, his memories flooding back to him. Damn staff! It was potent key he had sought and found in the jungle at least 1,000 years ago. He had searched for a decade, living off of snakes, fungus, and bugs. The staff gave his body immortality and the power to travel wherever he pleased. He used the magics it imbued to raise his cult of bastardized shaman. In the anterior cave, just beyond that dividing wall, he had fallen asleep against lay Quetz, Taluk, Kyoto, Qualachi, and Totol. They had first started their conquest and kingdom building in the south, far from here. Though the magic of the medicine men was too powerful, they were beaten back by strength of arms and strong religious observance to the local spirit deities ruling their fiefs. They were driven north, farther and farther, until they were bound and trapped in the volcano named for the setting sun. Mictlan had sat there for century upon century with his 5 lieutenants, gradually growing in strength, generation by generation, as the people who had put them there passed on less and less of the old traditions in favor of the new. Slowly the people forgot the dance of binding that they had been performing at all of their rituals, until one generation it was forgotten. He had woken up them then and caused the volcano to erupt, exploding outward, leaving only a crater. This had been foreseen by a local chieftain who had greeted them on the floor of the forest below. The people had tried to organize, but it was useless. Mictlan had used potent key to establish a headquarters under the mountains here, a place considered a land of evil energy and refuge to witches and skinwalkers. The foul magic of Mictlan and the others, as they built armies and conquered then enslaved the local populations, staining their kingdom red. Yes, the red soil acted as a warning sign to the surrounding tribes. It was from the Red Land that they had marched. The tribes themselves sat at the center of trade routes, stretching to the ocean in the west and across many lands to the east and south, and even north into the mountains. They had gathered riches from them. Mictlan frowned then, his success being his downfall. He had seen it coming, but the momentum was already set. The peoples around his Red Kingdom were not willing to tolerate the constant raiding and enslavement. They left and never returned. Their conflict was not just with him, but they were fighting for land, which seemed to be fighting them, given its harsh weather and arid climate. It was no wonder moving away became so enticing. The vital trade regionally was not enough to motivate them to endure the persecution. With the people gone, they took something with them, the land slowly losing its tolerance for twisted magic, the forces powering potent key waning. They were trapped here, as if to hunger. The lieutenants began falling. Mictlan dragged them all back here to the main cave to slumber until he had gathered them all. Then it was just him. He recalled now his feeling of weakness, the lethargy. He sat down, leaning against the cavern wall, staring at the fading staff as it spun, just as it did now above the pool. He did not know what came first, the darkness of his eyelids, or the darkness of the staff's light going out. But he did remember darkness in this deep, black hole in the ground. Mictlan sat up, his belly roaring, the only sound the cave had heard in perhaps a few centuries or more. He got up onto his elbows, then rolled onto his knees, grabbing his crown of feathers and antlers as he stood. He tried to step, wobbling, stretching his arms out to balance and steady himself should he fall. Then he took another step. He was hungry. He needed to eat. Had people returned to this land? How many? He wanted a feast. He found the wall he had been sleeping against for who knew how long, then placed a hand upon its dusty surface, and walked along it to the left and through the tunnel. Both tunnels led to the same room, a small chamber about 30 feet long. At the other end, a closed door of wood, sturdy but betraying no light to or from the other side. Mictlan's minions sat as he had left them, illuminated by the light blue light on the walls and ceiling. He approached Quetz, A slender man in a snakeskin pants and a shirt, with no shoes nor fanciful attire of any kind. Awake. McLan placed a thumb of flesh, or on the flesh of Quetz's forehead, a turquoise light illuminating under his print. For a moment, the eyes of Quetz opened slowly, blinking. His yellow snake eyes looked up to McLan. A forked tongue slipped in and out of his mouth. So good to see you, McLan, Quetz murmured. Go, drink, was McLan's reply. It was to Talek he turned next, the medium-framed man, his head bald. He wore no shirt, and his pants were rough spun, his arms adorned with bracelets of fine sapphires. McLan again placed his thumb on the head of the sleeping man, the blue light affirming he had imparted the spell to wake his subordinate. McLan, as the tide returns, I knew you would. The man with brilliant blue eyes spoke. Go, drink, was the leader's response. With pleasure. McLan continued, pressing thumb to the boy Kyoto and his adult elder brother, Kolachi. Kyoto, possessing the snout of a coyote and the same ears, his clothing that of furs. His brother Kolachi was not so disfigured, wearing the same furs and with eyes of a wolf. Finally, McLan's thumb found Totol, the wire-framed, eagle-beaked minion. McLan's orders for each was the same. Go, drink. As each crawled away, their leader opened the wooden door and took to a hall of stone that intruded upon an oval room with flat floor and curved ceiling. In the center, small rocks were organized into a circle a few strides in diameter. In order of waking, Quetz, Talek, Kyoto, Kolachi, and Totol arrived in the room. We were not the only ones to awake. McLan held a hand out to the circle of rocks. The rocks rose and spun in a circle at first. Then they split, and the smaller pieces separated into the 3D geometric shape of a sphere. Faster and faster they spun, glowing rust red. Our vortexes are alive and ready to be roused. They all admired the magic for a moment as it blinked once, then stabilized. Come, McLan beckoned his troop. They stepped forward as one group into the spinning rocks, which somehow managed to pass through them. As each found their way to the center of the sphere, they were transported through space. McLan, being the first through, was the first out into the desert night. He took in the scene that shocked him to his core. What had become of the world? It was an amazing sight. Last he had stood upon this place, staring down from one of the red mountains of rock, he had seen few lights from campfires of an encampment or two of their slaves. What he and each of his followers now faced was a sprawling city, large houses built upon the rock they had stained red, their lights bright, not flickering like fire, but static, like the blue emanating from the staff. What manner of magic was this? McLan spotted long lines of what must have been roads, lit by tall standing lamps. Upon these roads traversed large boxes that had their own lights illuminating in white and yellow their direction of travel. This is a society rich in technology, Quetz observed in his serpent intonation. It was magic that woke us, McLan's response. These people must have been here a long time, and they did not. He turned to his troop then. I must conjure elementals. Go out and find the reason for the end of our slumber. Feast as well. There seems to be plenty to eat. He smiled. Our kingdom will be vast.